Hey guys, so today I want to talk about my recent GPU upgrade. I went from a Nvidia 670 to a Gigabyte 980 G1 Gaming, which is a fairly huge upgrade. I'm going to briefly go over the performance difference in Battlefield 4 and a few other benchmark tests. I know obviously it's going to be a lot faster than the 670, but it's really interesting to see the results so I can compare, and maybe hopefully some of you guys might be interested in seeing how they compare to each other. So the main reason why I wanted to upgrade is I want to eventually buy a G-Sync monitor with the higher refresh rates. If you're going to use one of those kind of monitors, you do need a powerful GPU to back it up. So let's first go over my system specs. The CPU is a i7-3770K that's been overclocked. My GPU before the Gigabyte 980 was a 670 like I said before, which has performed pretty well over the years. The motherboard is a MSI Z77A GD65 and I have 16GB 2400 RAM from G-Skill. As for the overclocking, for my 670, this was my highest overclock I was able to accomplish while it's still being stable. I had plus 118 on the core frequency, which gave it a total boost clock speed of 1228 MHz. And as you can see, it has plus 500 on the memory. Also, the overvoltage is maxed out, which was the only way to keep it stable. As for the 980, I was pretty damn happy about the overclock. It managed a stable plus 189 offset on the core to bring the boost clock speed to 1556 and plus 590 on the memory to bring it to 7600 MHz. And the best thing about this overclock on a 980 is I didn't need any more voltage. If you haven't noticed already, the GPU voltage is at stock level. However though, I kind of ran into something weird. If I put the boost clock offset a tad higher than 189, so if I put it to 192, it became completely unstable. And no matter how much extra voltage I gave it, it wouldn't become stable at all. So it seems like I was able to hit the overclock wall without needing any extra voltage like I said, but I can't help but think there might be a little more room for overclocking if I flashed a different BIOS. I've read people getting about 1600 boost clock on the Gigabyte 980, but at the moment I'm pretty happy about this overclock. As for temperatures, it seemed to hover around 61 degrees with air cooling while stress testing, but I imagine it will be a lot lower because at the moment it's pretty damn hot and my aircon isn't really working that well. So before I show you guys the in-game performance, I want to show you two different configs I use for BF4. The one on the left doesn't give you any kind of FPS boost, but what it does do is it almost completely removes all the blurring around the edges of your screen when you're being suppressed, which helps a lot in still clearly seeing your surroundings when you're being shot at. For the sake of this performance test, I'm using the config on the left but have removed the FPS limiter. I usually set it to 60 FPS to match the refresh rate of my monitor, and I normally use a config on the right side for my Nvidia 670. This config will give you about 15 to 20-ish FPS boost, which is great if you need it. I'll copy and paste both of the config files in the description if anyone needs them. Also, make sure to change the FPS cap to whatever you want, or just remove the line completely if you want your FPS to be uncapped. So let's take a look at the performance in game. Graphics are set to ultra preset at 1080p, but please note normally on the 670 I turn MSAA off and use a config file that boosts your FPS, because sometimes the 670 can't really keep the game running above 60 FPS on ultra settings. But for the sake of the test, I'm going to use ultra setting on the 670 and the 980. So the first test was using the simple inbuilt benchmark, which you can access from the video tab in the options menu. On the 670 I got an average of 76 FPS, but on the 980 I got 138, which I kind of was expecting anyway, but it's cool to see how much of a difference each card can perform. As for the gameplay test, once again I'm still using the Ultra preset for both of the cards, and as for the 670 I decided to join a server running Siege of Shanghai 24/7, and as you can see I'm at the D flag on the rooftop defending the capture point, and eventually I'll jump down to kill a few enemies and stay in one place. You'll see my FPS on the top right, which I did enlarge so you guys can easily see. The FPS manages to stay above 60 and sometimes going to 70-80 FPS, but like I said before, normally I have MSAA turned off as well as a few other graphics options. If we jump onto the 980, trying to keep the test exactly the same, I'm at the same capture point on the map, and pretty much doing exactly the same thing, just defending the D flag, and as you can see the FPS is tons higher. I mean, it's always 120 plus, sometimes going to 150, which is the kind of performance I expected and need for when I get a higher refresh rate monitor. Not entirely sure which one I'll go for, I haven't really made that decision yet. I've read some people suggesting to wait for the second generation of G-Sync, but at the moment I can't really say what I'll go for. I also decided to do a test in Operation Metro, once again using the Ultra preset for both of the cards. As you can see, the Nvidia 670 average FPS seems to be about the same as before, seems to hover around the 70 to 80 FPS mark, sometimes dropping down to 65 or so. I think the highest I saw it was 103 FPS. As for the 980, I'm roughly in the same situation here, also using the Ultra settings, and as you can see there's a pretty big difference in FPS, seems to hover around 160 to 170, sometimes going up to 180 or so. I think the lowest I saw it was 145 FPS. So I decided to throw in a few more tests. I used the UNIGINE Heaven benchmark tool, which I really like using when testing overclock instability. As you can see, I'm using the ultra quality with 8x AA for testing both of the cards. As for the 670, I got a score of 960 with a minimum FPS of 18.6 and a max of 90.7, and the average FPS was 38.1. As for the 980, as expected, it should be quite a lot higher. I ended up with a score of 1958, minimum FPS was 30.9 and max was 161, and the average FPS was 77.7. Another benchmark tool I really like to use is the Sniper Elite version 2 benchmark test. I see a lot of people using this as well to get an idea of their GPU performance, and not to mention the actual test is pretty damn cool to watch, especially at the end when they show the bullet traveling into some guy's head, as you can see here. On the 670, average FPS was 58.2 and on the 980 it was 102.6. So overall performance difference between the 980 and the 670 was almost double. However, in BF4 the FPS difference was a bit more than double, but overall I was pretty happy with the purchase, and I really can't wait until I can buy a higher refresh rate monitor, which, like I said before, is the main reason why I brought the 980. If I was staying with my 60Hz monitor, there's no real point in buying such a powerful card. The 670 is more than enough to keep most games at 60 FPS. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any more questions, make sure to leave it in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.